Welcome to the SGS ROADSTARZ DiSE session titled Psyched Up or Psyched Out, Managing Pre-Competition Nerves to Maximize Performance. This session is related to the Competition Workbook, so this is aimed at Year 2 DiCE athletes who are completing their Competition Workbook. Let's jump in. So the objectives on today's session, first of all, understand the impact of anxiety on physical performance in cycling, recognizing the signs of harmful anxiety versus positive pre-race arousal. Thirdly, learning proven methods to manage to manage pre-competition nerves. And then finally, exploring real-life examples from elite level cycling. So we often hear the term anxiety when we're discussing high-performance sports, and especially in cycling. So what exactly do we mean by anxiety? Well, our working definition is a psychological and physiological response to stress that can affect performance. And anxiety can basically exist in two forms. So first of all, we've got the cognitive form. So the word cognitive means kind of the mind, thinking. So cognitive anxiety is when we worry, we have worrying thoughts, we doubt our ability, we doubt our fitness level. Sometimes we doubt whether we should actually be at that level of competition. And this can create negative expectations. Alternatively, we could have negative expectations as a form of anxiety. So expecting to perform under our ability or to perform badly. And then we've got somatic anxiety. Somatic anxiety is physical. So these include symptoms like racing heart, muscle tension, nausea, feeling sick. So you will no doubt be aware of both of these forms of anxiety, because everyone who's been in a competitive situation where the outcome of the competitive situation is meaningful to them will have experienced both of these forms of anxiety. So as potential elite level world class cyclists, these feelings will not be unusual to you. Now, some studies have shown that cognitive anxiety can decrease endurance performance by up to 10%, while somatic anxiety can impair fine motor skills. So fine motor skills, crucial for bike handling, are the kind of smaller movements. So, for instance, the sequence of braking, or the execution of a gear change, or something to do with kind of positioning in the peloton, or maintaining, not crashing when you've kind of overcooked a corner slightly, or if you've got yourself boxed in a group, and it's kind of handlebar to handlebar. The ability to kind of maintain those fine motor skills. So motor meaning muscle, okay? But we're looking at from a cognitive perspective, okay, cognitive anxiety, 10%. Now, let's think about 10%, because 10% is huge. In the era of marginal gains, which we often talk about, marginal gains, one marginal gain, if it's a really, really big marginal gain, it might create a 1 or 2% change in performance. We're talking about a 10% difference in performance here. This is the difference between qualifying, not qualifying, podium, or top 30. So it's a huge difference, okay? And it's something that, if we are serious athletes and we are serious about taking our cycling to the highest level that we can, then this is something that we need to be doing some work on. So let's have a little kind of think then about how anxiety can affect cyclists. Well, first of all, we can get the reduced focus, okay? So, not concentrating, okay? So if you're feeling anxious, then one of the effects of that could be reduced focus, not thinking clearly during a race, missing race opportunities. So, missing a break, or, missing an opportunity to attack, or, losing loads of positions in a kind of, in a bunch start race. We've then got tension of the muscles. Now, tension of the muscles will absolutely destroy your power output. So this will increase your energy expenditure, reduce your efficiency, reduce your power output. Can mean the difference between being able to get across to a move or going out the back. It can be that different, that much of a difference or that much of an impact. We've also got another effect here of shallow breathing. So shallow breathing will limit your oxygen delivery to the muscles. Well, that's just going to cause early fatigue. And then we've got like a negative spiral. So worrying about poor performance often leads to what's known as a self-fulfilling prophecy. So a saying I really like, and think about this when I say it: whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you are right. Think about that. I'll say it once more. Whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you are right. So what that's telling us is that our deep belief will essentially determine the outcome. Okay, so if we actually believe that whatever this task is, if we believe that we're not capable of doing it, then we won't do it. And this is part of what's known as a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, there's loads that we could go into on self-fulfilling prophecies and about belief, but that's not what we're here for. We're here for learning about anxiety, but anxiety will cause negative beliefs. Okay, so think about what I've just said. If whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you're right. If anxiety can cause negative thoughts and negative beliefs, well, there's a great example of how anxiety will cause negativity, which will cause a poor outcome or a suboptimal outcome. I prefer poor outcome, actually. Suboptimal sounds a bit too poncy, but in other words, we're not going to do very well. Bradley Wiggins once admitted that pre-race anxiety almost made him pull out of the 2012 Tour, which he actually went on to win. But he used mental strategies to channel it into focus. We're going to look at some of those mental strategies. Right. So before we get to strategies, let's think about some of the theory here, because one of the things I'm keen for you guys to be absolutely clear on is, this is not just kind of, anecdote, opinion, like, somebody down the pub mentioned, this kind of stuff, or the new one, bro science. Okay. Everything that I'm covering here is a blend of empirical observations plus, peer-reviewed research. So in other words, this stuff is real. This stuff makes a difference. So the anxiety performance relationship is known as the inverted U hypothesis. The next slide is a diagram, so I'll explain to you a bit more about why it's called an inverted U hypothesis. But the characteristics of this relationship are: a moderate level of arousal enhances performance, but too much or too little harms it. So low arousal leads to us feeling unprepared and flat, and optimal arousal enables us to feel focused and energized, and high arousal leads to us feeling overwhelmed and panicked. So the goal is to manage anxiety so that we stay in the optimal performance zone. I'm mixing two different terms here. I don't know if you've noticed. I'm mixing the term arousal and anxiety, and up until this point in this slide, I've not actually mentioned the word arousal yet. Okay, arousal can obviously have lots of different meanings, but it's got a very specific meaning in the sense of sports performance. I will explain that now. Here's our inverted U theory. So if you look at this graph, the shape of this this trace on the graph, it looks like an upside down U. Okay, hence the inverted U. Inverted U means an upside down U. So on this axis here, we've got arousal level, okay, arousal. And on this axis here, we've got performance. Let's just dig into the word arousal for a second. Now, title of this session is Psyched Up versus Psyched Out. These are terms which you will be familiar with because they are commonly used terms. Okay, you can be psyched up, meaning yeah, you're ready to go, or you can be psyched out, which means oh my god, this is too much. Like, you know, I'm just not going to perform to a high level here. This is like too much for me to manage mentally. Like, you know, being overwhelmed by the kind of significance of a race or the significance of, you know, the training group that you are, you know, invited to train with. You know, just psyched out, overwhelmed. Psyched up is like, yeah, I'm really up for this. Okay, well, that's arousal. Okay, so when we're talking about low arousal, then we're not really that psyched up at all. When we're talking about high arousal, where we become overwhelmed, well, high arousal is where the word anxiety comes in. So if you get too psyched up, you actually start to become worried. Okay, so there is an optimal level of arousal where our performance, if you look at the graph, our performance is at its highest. Okay, performance is on this axis. Our performance is at its highest when we are at an optimal arousal level. Okay, we're not bored. We're not apathetic. Oh, it doesn't matter, who cares? And we're also not kind of stressed and anxious and worried. We're psyched up. Okay, so the trick really in knowing this is, right, okay, well, if this is true, and this is true, okay, this is from like decades and decades of peer-reviewed science and empirical observations, we know that people perform at their best when they're at the right level of arousal. They are psyched up. Okay, they're not psyched out with high anxiety, and they're not bored or apathetic. Apathetic means like, who cares? They're psyched up. They're at the optimal level. Okay, so we need to understand what we can be doing to achieve that, because the purpose of this session is not for you guys to understand the theory. That was just a little bit of theory to explain to you what's going on. Okay, so we're more interested on DISE. We're more interested in, right, okay, well, what do I do then? Well, this is where we learn what to do. One of the most commonly used methods, and this is used not just in cycling but across the board in a lot of elite level sports, is pre-race or pre-competition breathing techniques. Okay, sometimes known as the 4-4-6 method. So in the 4-4-6 method, you inhale for 4 seconds. Okay, so a gradual 4-second inhalation. You hold for 4 seconds. And you exhale for 6 seconds. Okay, this has an effect of reducing heart rate and promoting calmness. And if you don't believe me, then look up some research by Chen et al. Et al means like and other authors, which was published in 2020. Again, it's peer-reviewed science. It's not anecdote. Okay, this is stuff that works. Okay, the next one is visualization, and I'm going to go through this one fairly quickly because we're doing a session in more detail on this next week. So visualization is when we imagine the perfect race, how it feels, how it looks, how it sounds. Okay, so this is a bit misleading because visualization, you would think, oh, it's just how something looks. Okay, imagining what performing well would look like. But actually, we're going for the full-on sensory experience. The effect here is reducing cognitive anxiety, which you know about now, you know what that means, and it improves performance. Again, some research, very recent, Taylor et al. 2019. Okay, so I'm going to go through this as a technique in more detail in our next session, because this takes a little bit, there's a bit more to this. There's different types of visualization. There's also something called imagery. So we'll do a bit more on that in our next session. Routines. So managing pre-competition nerves. So we can use a pre-performance routine where we develop a consistent routine. Could be a warm-up. This is one of the reasons why warm-ups are so important, because when you're doing a warm-up, it's an opportunity to settle nerves. So we could have start line rituals. For instance, you see riders checking their checking their equipment out, making sure that the tires are the right pressure, or checking their gears, cleaning their glasses, fiddling around with whatever, fiddling around with like their the bike, anything really. So the proven effect here, reduce routines of this type, this nature, they provide a sense of control and reduce unpredictability. Okay, that's awesome, isn't it? Reducing unpredictability. The example that I was thinking of when I was writing this slide was a tennis player called Rafa Nadal, who only retired recently. Actually, Rafa Nadal, one of the greatest tennis players ever. He had a sequence of little routines that he took before every time he served the ball. So he'd adjust his shorts, he'd rub his nose, he'd touch his shoulders and just kind of pull his shirt off of his shoulders. Then he'd tuck his hair behind his ears, and then he'd serve. And it was the same routine every single time. If you don't believe me, after this session, have a look on YouTube, Rafa Nadal serve, and you'll see it. Okay, so this was his way of managing pre-competition nerves, and you got to say it obviously had a positive effect, because he's one of the greatest tennis players who's ever lived. Positive self-talk. So replacing "I'm not ready" or words to that effect with "I've prepared for this and I'm ready to perform," or words to that effect. Now, it's actually more effective when you find your own positive phrases. Okay, phrases that resonate with you, mean something to you. Okay, don't just parrot out "I've prepared for this and I'm ready to perform." That's an example. Create something that is meaningful to you. Proven effect. Self-talk enhances focus and motivation. I'm not going to say this name, but these guys published some really good work on this in 2018, peer-reviewed science. How do you practice positive self-talk? So first of all, recognizing the negative self-talk patterns. So becoming aware of thought patterns and identifying instances of negative self-talk, such as all or nothing thinking, black and white thinking, catastrophizing, making a mountain out of a molehill. Then reframe negative thoughts into positive ones. Challenge and replace negative thoughts with positive, constructive statements instead. Okay? For example, I am not surprised I feel nervous. This is a big race. I've been training for this race. This race is meaningful. The outcome of this race is meaningful. I can only do my best. There is so much which is outside of my control, but the one thing I can control is my efforts. So that's an example of a reframe. Practicing mindfulness and self-compassion, treating yourself with kindness and compassion, acknowledging that everyone makes mistakes and has room for growth. This is a huge area in elite sports psychology right now. Using positive affirmations, creating a list of positive affirmations that resonate with you and repeat them regularly. Positive affirmations. So reminding yourself of the positive things about you as a person, you as an athlete. Okay, the things that you do well. Just kind of like an audit really on the things that you do right. Okay, because let's face it, and a large degree of outcome in competition is outside of your control. You've not got full control over this situation, okay? But you have got control over what you think and your judgments. And that's really where positive affirmations come in, is recognizing that. And then lastly, seeking out positive influences. So engage with people social media accounts and environments that promote positivity and self-growth. So big point here, surround yourself with positive people. Okay, remove the kind of like, the negativity. I don't mean criticism. Okay, criticism is not negativity, because criticism can be constructive and helpful. So what I'm not talking about here is just surrounding ourselves with, people who are, completely kind of, living on a different planet, utopian Disneyland. What I'm talking about here is like, being around people who think positively, act positively. Okay, that's going to help you as an athlete. And, sometimes people say like, oh, this is interesting. Why has this rider performed so well all of a sudden when they've changed team? Well, maybe it's the people within the team. It's the vibe, okay, that being in a certain team creates, which is allowing people to kind of take their performance to that next level. Always a great example in anything on DICE is Geraint Thomas. As I'm recording this, it's 2025, and this is supposed to be Geraint's last year. And I think he's a great role model for all of you guys, regardless of the discipline that you do. So before big races, Geraint uses a mixture of breathing exercises and visualization. He recalls focusing on controllable factors like pacing, effort, rather than the actual results. And the outcome is reduced stress and better tactical decisions during races. Okay. Now, he's talked extensively about different races where, for instance, when he won the Tour, and it was the Alpe d'Huez stage, which he actually went on to win, by the way. He won the Alpe d'Huez stage in 2018, 17, I'm not sure. And he said when they got to the bottom of the Alpe d'Huez, which is a 13-kilometer climb, he felt like the pace was so fast, he felt like he was going to get dropped. So his strategy was just to make it to the next hairpin. There are 21 hairpins on the Alpe d'Huez. His strategy was to make it to the next hairpin. And then after that, his strategy was to make it to the next hairpin. Okay, and that was one of his methods of managing that. Okay, so that negative belief of like, I'm going to get dropped, became displaced by, okay, this is what I'm going to do next. All right, so read his books, listen to his podcasts. There are so many giveaways. Okay, I think he's a very open guy as well, and if you listen to what he says, you can learn an awful lot about how to be successful, not just be successful at the elite level, but sustainably successful. I mean, the guy's 20 years pro. Okay, so I think you can learn a lot there. Right, some exercises I want you to try. So we're getting towards the end of this session now. So I want you to take some time to practice the 4-4-6 method. Okay, we're not going to do it on here now because this is a recording, and if we were doing it live, I would have been putting you guys through this. Then what I want you to do is a 1-minute visualization exercise. Picture yourself on the start line, calm and focused, and then racing confidently. Okay, now these are practical exercises, things to do. Now, from the word practical, we also get the word practice, okay, which means that when you do these things for the first time, it feels weird, it feels like it doesn't work, it just feels kind of totally alien. Practice, okay, just like you train on the bike, okay, practice these exercises. Okay, what have you got to lose? Do you want to get to the end of your cycling career asking yourself the question, did I do everything possible to give myself the best chance of being an elite rider? Well, if you're not going to do these exercises, the answer to that question will be no. Couple of takeaways. So anxiety is totally normal, but too much of it can harm performance. Okay, so don't look at anxiety as abnormal. Look around the race and look at people who look calm and relaxed. Well, behind the kind of facade, they will be just as worried as you are. Okay, anxiety is normal, but we need to manage it. Use some techniques, use proven techniques. We've been through those in this session. Find out what works for you and then be consistent. Okay, like everything else I've told you about in DICE. Okay, it's all about consistency. One amazing training session will make no difference. One amazing practice of visualization or positive self-talk makes no difference. It's about applying these things consistently. Managing nerves is a skill, and it improves with practice. Ask yourself this, and if you're interested in, in this, in learning more, what strategy will you practice at your next competition? I'm actually asking you that. It's not just a reflective question, actually. I'm asking you. Tell me, message me, say, this is what I'm doing. What do you think? I'll give you some feedback. So, what have your experiences been so far with managing pre-race anxiety? Okay, probably, unless you've been doing any of this stuff, it's probably been a bit hit and miss. And what strategies have you used so far? Maybe you've not used any strategies. So we now turn our attention to which new methods are we interested in trying to improve our performance in the future. All right. Guys, you've got some work to do. And when I say work, I don't mean workbooks. I mean practicing, controlling, managing anxiety. It will improve your performance. That's why we're doing it. Nice one. Cheers, guys.